Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving Dentist Expert Panel on Practice Transitions 101, how to buy, sell, or merge smoothly. We are here to help dental professionals and practice owners run thriving businesses, and over the next hour, we'll be sharing actionable strategies for navigating this critical phase of your career. So thank you all for joining us. Let's give a warm welcome to our panelists, Josh McSpadden, Brian Hanks, and Scott Plantenberg. Whether you're planning an exit or exploring your first opportunity, this panel will give you the real-world insights to move forward with confidence. And this is a live event, so please use the chat to ask questions and share your reaction. Now, before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsor, Thriving, sponsored by Echo Marketing. Because they tackle a question that is critical for any transition. Whether you're buying or selling, a practice's ultimate value is tied to its ability to consistently attract new and high-quality patients. Here's a quick tip from them. Does the practice show up online, or are all the leads going to your competitors? A strong digital presence isn't just a nice to have, it is a quantifiable asset that can make or break a deal. Equa is an expert in building that asset with over 14 years of service excellence. Later in the webinar, we're actually going to give you a tool to help you measure that strength of your asset in your own practice. So be sure to stay with us. Now let's get to know our experts who will be guiding our discussion. First of all, let's welcome Josh McSpadden. Josh is the leading expert in practice finance from Panacea Financial. Think of him as the architect behind the deal. He's on the front line structuring the customized financing that makes a successful transition possible. Whether you're buying your first practice or scaling an entire group, Josh, it's fantastic to have you and your financial expertise on the panel tonight. Next, we have Brian Hanks. Brian is a national transitions expert who has been directly involved in hundreds of deals across the country. He literally wrote the book, How to Buy a Dental Practice. As both a transition firm owner and dental CPA, Brian brings invaluable perspective on navigating the financial and tax complexities from every angle. Brian, we're thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And rounding out our incredible panel is Scott Plantenberg. Scott truly brings a truly unique 360-degree view to our discussion. Over his 35-year career, he has seen transitions from every possible side of the table. As a clinician, a consultant, a buyer for DSO, and now a sell-side representative. This means he has incredible depth of understanding what makes a transition work for everyone involved. Scott, thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
And the main points for tonight's discussion are going to be about two core ideas. One, the mechanics of the deal, the trends and the hard numbers, and just as importantly, the human side of the transition, focusing on communication and culture. And panelists, while I direct the first question, please treat this as a conversation, jump in, build on each other's points, and offer different perspectives. Our audience will benefit most from our combined wisdom. Now then, I'll be stopping my screen and we'll dive in to the first question. Right, we'll start with Josh. Are you ready, Josh?
I'm ready. That was quite the introduction. So hopefully I live up to half the stuff you just mentioned. But yes, I'm ready. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it, Josh. So let's start with the big picture. From your perspective, being on the front line, structuring the financing for these deals every day, what are the major marketing trends you are seeing that are shaping practice sales and acquisitions as we head into 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish there was a prescription for each market, but it's tied to each individual market. I'm still seeing a lot of corporate consolidation happening in states like Arizona, Texas. That's actually kind of driving up the purchase price of some of the individual practice owners. They're trying to get into ownership for the first time. So I'm still continuing to see a little bit of practices that are priced a little bit higher than normal to try to attract a corporate buyer. But at the same time,
Okay.
there's a lot of inventory of solo practitioners looking to retire, and I'm seeing quite a bit of the 61 to 65 age group of dentists that are looking to retiring in the next few years. And so there's plenty of inventory out there. I'm in Southern California, so we're starting to see quite a bit of inventory spread amongst some really nice transition brokerages into Arizona. Scott's got some nice listings. Texas, I still see a pretty big opportunity. And then for some reason, there's been a lot of activity in Florida, but we're still seeing a lot of corporate consolidation happening across the United States. But access to capital is still, rates are coming down, ticking down a little bit better than they were a year, 18 months ago. So access to capital is ready to go, and I see a lot of banks lending a lot of money in certain markets to well-ran, well-priced practices. But
Okay.
if I'm wrong, Scott and Brian, you guys jump in.
So I work with buyers. I'm a buyer's rep. I would say I would agree, Josh, in those markets nationwide. Well, I'd make two comments. First, I know a lot of buyers when they hear, "Hey, there's a lot of inventory," they intuit that I should be able to find a practice pretty fast, and that's almost never the case. So if you're a buyer, you're ready to buy now. You've talked to Josh. You've maybe called Scott. You got on his list and you're looking for a practice within a 15 to 30-minute drive of your house and you're not finding one, that is completely normal, despite what Josh said, which is accurate, which is there's plenty of inventory being number of practices for sale. I'm also seeing prices ticking up, but I put the blame somewhere else. I see a lot of DSOs unloading practices right now. I've got a lot of buyers who are buying the fourth, the seventh, the ninth location that the DSO is offloading. Private equity has dried up somewhat with interest rates rising in the last 2 to 3 years. What I'm seeing as the main factor for prices increasing is banks' availability to lend. The rules that bankers have, and Josh, again, you chime in if I'm incorrect here. My understanding across all of the different dental lenders is that their internal rules for how much they're willing to lend keeps ticking up. 10 years ago, it used to be there would be a cap on a percentage of collections, and that there still are caps based on profitability, but those caps are now much higher than they used to be 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and even as early as 12 months ago. Josh, would you, again, that's just
Yeah.
from my outside perspective.
Yeah, we're starting to see, usually, like you said, 10 years ago, everybody was capped at 85% loan to revenue, right? And brokers knew to price it within that space. Here at Panacea, we've adapted to that, and we look at, to help get to the 100% or 100% plus of collections, we can break down a transaction in a couple different ways. One, we can lend up to 100% on the goodwill or the cash flow of the practice, right? Instead of that 85, we push up to the 100. We also look, service-based dental companies usually don't carry account receivables, but if there are, we can lend up to 70, 75% of the AR. So if I lend a practice that's doing $1.15 million and $1 million is the 100%, so if it does $1 million bucks, but the purchase price is $1.15 million, I can go look at the ARs to get a little bit higher loan amount. Then I can also go to the equipment, which is a hard asset, and lend up to 50 to 65% of the useful life of the equipment. So we're seeing we had to adapt a little bit. Instead of it being 85% loan to revenue hard stop, we broke down the actual asset categories of the practices to where we can adapt to make sure that the private practices stay private. So that's one way that we look at it, is breaking down the asset of the actual practice and lending on that.
I always try to break this down to like what my sixth grader could understand. So like here's how I would interpret it. Guys like Scott are not dumb. In fact, Scott's a very, very smart broker. So if I were explaining this to my sixth grader, I'd say, the seller always has more power than the buyer, right? Almost always. If you're a buyer and you're trying to negotiate the price of the practice, you got to think about what power do you really have? You have two levers you can pull: how much you're willing to pay and whether or not you'll walk away from the practice. And the seller can always move down the line to the next buyer. They can always wait, aside from a few situations.
Sure.
So I think the pricing pressure, Josh just explained some of the specific rules. So if I were telling my sixth grader, I'd say, hey, listen, you want to go buy this dental business over here? The broker, the seller are going to price it somewhere near the maximum of what a bank is willing to pay. And if banks are willing to lend, if banks are willing to lend more money, the price is going to go up. That's just, it's supply and demand.
Yeah.
The sixth grader wouldn't get supply and demand, but I think I did okay other than that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Scott.
I mean, ultimately too, my job is to help them understand, do their due diligence and understand what they're actually investing in, right? So sometimes, I want to lend 90, 95%, maybe put the rest on a seller carry or whatever the case might be. But each I don't call these transitions so much. I call them projects, right? Because the buyer's ability to obtain financing, 90% of their ability depends on how the seller ran the practice from an EBITDA standpoint, right? So it's not so cookie cutter across the country, but that's where, that's the fun part is especially you, Brian, doing the buyer representation. We really help them understand and educate our buyers on what they're really buying, where the cash flow is, how it travels through. But yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, fantastic points. It's a great time. It seems to be both a seller and a buyer for dental practices, with banks having adequate lending power. And so, Brian, let's talk about the other side, the buyer side, right? Drilling down on the key players. You work with both DSOs and private buyers. From your seat, how do their playbooks and priorities differ when they approach acquisitions today?
Oh, it's completely different. It's not even apples and oranges. It's apples and, like, I don't know, tennis balls or something, right? I mean, they're both round and maybe could be green, but the the private seller and private buyer are doing what they've done for the last few hundred years, which is to effectively transfer the goodwill from one dentist to another and continue the legacy of helping people have good oral health and help their teeth. A DSO's goals are different. I get it approached all the time by DSOs. Hey, you can help me find the practices. You can help me consolidate. And their goals are to amass as many practices, usually within a geographic area, but not always, and try to flip that grouping of practices to the next, group, a private equity group, sometimes hedge fund or a big bank. And you can get up to another, you can go to the Heartlands or the MB2s and some of these bigger DSOs. But their goal is what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture the income stream. And that income stream, now a private buyer is doing the same, but the DSO is primarily concerned with the profitability and patient experience second. In my experience, that's been largely true. The smart DSOs approach that backwards, but I haven't seen that generally be the case. It's mainly a numbers game. So if you're in a practice that's collecting $2.5 million or more, there's a 100% guarantee you will get an offer from a DSO at some point. You'll get a cold email, you'll get a box in the mail, someone will knock on your door, or just pick up the phone and call you. If you've got a practice $1.5 to $2.5 million, I'd say there's a 60 to 70% likelihood you get that offer to sell to a DSO. Then anything under $1.5 million, it's kind of a dice roll depending on geography and some other factors. Why? Well, it's because the income stream that the DSO is targeting is worth that at those bigger numbers. Average practice, specialists and whether or not their associates throw these numbers off a little bit, but the average practice profitability is somewhere around 38 to 40%, meaning if there's $1 in collections, the owner is keeping 38 cents on the dollar. So if the bigger the numerator, right, times 0.38 means there's more profit for the buyer of that practice. In this case, we're talking about a DSO. Yeah. So I'm a little bit, I'll come back to your question, but one of my questions for DSO is always, how is the patient in the seat better off as a result of you buying this practice? And I have had a DSO. I have one DSO actually give me a cogent, meaningful, somewhat convincing answer to that question. But that was one of the, I don't know, Josh, Scott, how many DSOs have you guys talked to? Probably dozens, right? And
Right.
so that tells me that the goals between the private buyer's goal is they're thinking about the oral health of the patient in order to drive collections versus the DSO is thinking collections in order to bring profit. And that's the primary difference that I see.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, with regards to, I mean, as you said, it boils down to the flippability
Yeah, that's right.
of the for
True.
DSOs and versus like a much more legacy for the private buyers, a concern for that and the patient care.
Yeah.
Now speaking of finding the right fit, leading to another emerging trend, Scott, with your 360-degree view of the industry, it's not always a straightforward sale. For the dentists who aren't ready for a full exit, what are some of the hybrid or partnership models you're seeing that are becoming much more attractive?
Yeah, good question. When you look at DSOs, obviously they really do want that doctor to stick around for a period, 2 years, 3 years, ultimately 5 years or more. And so, historically, we've seen two primary versions of these DSO affiliations or partnerships, first being a joint venture model, where the selling dentist retains equity in their practice post-partnership, and they get distributions along the way of the profitability of the practice. If the practice is really on an ongoing growth curve going forward, the seller wants to benefit from that growth. So that model is really attractive. The other option we've seen is more of a rolled equity model where the seller gets equity in the holding company that just bought the practice, allowing that seller to experience growth in the entire platform, not just their own practice. And historically, over the last 15 years, this has had a rate of return somewhere between 3, 4, 5 times rate of return over a 5-year time period. But here of late, we're seeing a lot more hybrid models where some of that initial transaction is really a combination of both. So the selling doctor gets the benefits both of their own practice as well as what the group is doing. And additionally, many of these joint venture models, DSOs, are allowing the doctor at the time of a private equity investment into the group, they're allowing them to convert some of that retained practice equity into holding company equity at the time, which allows their money to experience really exponential growth over a bit longer time period. Just in the middle of one as we speak, $3.5 million practice, really good practice. The group he's choosing to partner with, they weren't even the highest bidder. They were the second highest bidder, and he really liked the group. If he sticks around for about 6 years and they've got 2 of these private equity events, we've already mapped it out. It's worth about $13 million to him. So for us, the key was putting him in front of enough groups to get them competing. And that drove the purchase price up. And in the end, what we want is what's best for the doctor. We want the doctor's life's work to be properly valued, give them as many options as we possibly can, and see what fits best for them. And if there is no good fit, then keep doing what you're doing. No, there's no reason you have to transact if we can't find you a good option.
Okay. So it seems like it's going to be a long-term game when it comes to even selling practices outright. And we actually have a question that I feel might, be good to be answered on the same page. Scott, in what way can a specialty practice differ from general practice when it comes to a practice valuation?
Yeah, certainly right now, the specialists are seeing some really tremendous valuations. The groups, these specialty groups, they want these specialists. They don't want them at the end of their career, because how do you ensure the referrals that have been coming to an endodontist or an oral surgeon, how do you ever assure that those are going to continue? So they're wanting to find those partners early enough so that they can experience enough of that benefit, bring the operational efficiencies and some of these other advantages that a group can bring while that doctor is still there, and that while that doctor still has some, connected concern for the future of that practice to assist with, bringing on the next associate so that that practice continues after the, call it 5-year time period. So yeah, it's just more it's a really growing trend. Ortho, oral surgery, endo, pedo, they really do want these specialists. And historically, that was not a big target audience because again, how do you sell your referral base if you're a specialist? I mean, you can, but whoever that buyer is taking an awfully big risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Carlos El Sayed, I hope Scott answered your question.
I've got,
And
Adish, I've got some actual numbers.
yes, please.
If you don't mind. Carlos, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'll tell you what a GP practice. This is my data, and I'm updating. I got a 5th edition of How to Buy a Dental Practice coming out next month. So I was just futzing with the numbers. Average price to revenue. Okay, so price to revenue or price to collections for a GP practice in the 1,800 practices that we valued in the last 8 years. 76.38%. That's a median, right? So that's a normal distribution curve. That's the line in the middle, meaning half GP practices are valued more than 76.38, half are below. Timeout to just note that price to revenue is a terrible measure of valuing a practice. But it's used often in discussions like this because it's fast and easy. But Carlos, your question is, how does a specialty practice compare? Now, again, these are my data points, 1,500 of them. I've got 2 specialists that in private sales get slightly lower valuation, perio and pros, 73 and 74 specifically. Endo, 78, pedo, 79.78, 80 for all intents and purposes, oral surgery, 81, and ortho, 83, 82.66. Ortho's a special case, though. If you're an orthodontist, you got to remember you're buying the contracts receivable, right? I've got a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old both in braces right now, and I looked at the numbers, and I'm not an idiot, and so I'm paying the orthodontist monthly instead of upfront. If you buy my orthodontist practice, right, you're buying my contractual obligation to keep making those payments, which is one of the reasons ortho practices are valued higher. But those are some real numbers. I hope that's helpful.
Super. Thank you very much.
I'll throw in one additional, again, groups different than private.
That's right.
Endodontist in Pennsylvania, $3 million practice, took him to market. We got an $8 million valuation on that practice.
Yeah.
That's how badly the group wanted him.
Yeah,
So,
Adish, I want to, and Scott, I actually agreed with everything Scott said. I like to be the devil's advocate, so I'll play devil's advocate only because I'm the buyer's rep and Scott's the evil broker. Scott knows I'm kidding. I would just so I have a background, a Wall Street background, a CFP, and some of the financial. One of the principles that I always caution my investors to remember is the principle of diversification, right? And that is, when do you spread out your investments? And I always tell an investor, you diversify when you don't have control, right? So if you're investing in the stock market, the bond market, you're investing in a REIT, real estate investment trust, something like that, you don't have control. I can't call up Tim Cook at Apple and say, hey, I think you need to do X, Y, and Z on the iPhone differently. He's not going to take my call. I have no control. When that's the case, you diversify, which is why index funds are so popular for stock investments. Now, okay, so when you own a practice, you have 100% control, or if you're in a partnership, you have 50 or 33%, but you've got some control over your investment. When you sell to a DSO, it's almost always true. And why would a DSO buy if they're not going to take control? And so Scott's scenario where the doctor flipped sold to DSO, they had an equity event once, an equity event twice. They made $13 million. Hooray. When that works out, that's fantastic. The assumption, though, is that those roll-ups happen. And that's a big assumption. And you as the doctor, you no longer have control, right? So you're violating the principle of diversification, which can work out, right? And it worked out for Scott's buyer, and it often works out for sellers. I would just caution the sellers out there to remember, what are your assumptions? Your assumptions are that interest rates are going to stay low, that the practices continues to be profitable, that the DSO continues to let me run things the way I have. Not all of which might be true in the future, right? So that's me being devil's advocate, and everything Scott said is 100% correct.
Okay, Scott, one final chance for you to tell your point of view on what Brian just mentioned.
Yeah, I don't really have anything, to add. We're representing these sellers. We're a fiduciary. So, we want to help those doctors get the best outcome. So we've got to put really good groups in front of that doctor. It isn't just, again, who's going to offer the most, it's who's the right partner long term. Because you're right, those groups are making some promises and some expectations about, that second bite or even third bite of the apple. So we really have to vet out all these groups, and we need to know that that experience was good for the doctor, so that we're going to want to put that group in front of our next client. And so, to be honest, even though we're the fiduciary to the seller, these groups end up being our long-term partner, because we have to know that they're a good option. And the ones that aren't, or their deal structure is something that is really a bad offer for the doctor, we just don't put these groups in front of our doctors. I mean, you're talking 200 to 300 groups across the country, and we know them all. We've got them all. We understand what they're looking for. And when we get a new listing and we learn what the doctor's goals are, then that's going to dictate who we're going to put in front of them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And we do our share of private buyers. We do that all the time. But what's changed here we've been around 17 years doing this, but right now it's probably 80% of what we do are sellers that want to find groups. Our average age last year was 46 years old that transacted.
46 years old. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Scott, Brian, for your wonderful insights. I'm sure, our audience got a lot over there. Now, Josh, you've been a little bit out of the picture momentarily, but we are bringing you right
I'll
back
let the
in.
buyer and the seller rep guys go at it and just sit here with my popcorn.
Like ESPN, you gotta make some fireworks to get the ratings up, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
We won't be so nice on question 2.
There you go.
And moving that aside a little bit, we are going to get to the heart of the deal, the valuation. Josh, when a dentist is preparing to sell, what is the single biggest and potentially most expensive mistake they make when trying to determine the true value of their practice?
There's a few things that come to mind. I think number one is I've seen in my career where a seller kind of hovers around, let's just say $1 million or $900,000 pretty consistently over the previous 3 to 5 years, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to sell next year, and they step on the gas, and that tries to drive up the price because they know a bank's going to lend 85-90% of collections. And collections don't necessarily drive the value. If you keep the same expenses at that same level, it's for every dollar, your expenses stay the same. So I'm seeing, I kind of wish that, the dental practices are a little bit different than the veterinary side. Veterinary sells in a multiple of EBITDA, right? Even on the private and on the group practice side. And I kind of wish dentists, Scott and Brian, we can duke this out, but I wish it was going to go more of an EBITDA number, right? Because EBITDA, you're buying the transferable cash flow from the seller to the buyer, not how well the seller can produce collections. So I think one of the biggest overlooks is that they try to spike collections to try to get a higher purchase price down the line. When cash flow, it is what it is, right? If expenses stay the same, then it's really the sellers aren't going to be able to afford what the practice is actually, throwing off from an EBITDA and other seller discretionary income. And so I think that's one of the big missteps. I also think one of the other overlooks is that as a seller might go on the flip side, as a seller start to go towards retirement and they find a buyer, they start to slow down the production, and if for some reason the sell gets delayed a little bit, now that baseline, the seller's going to want to see updated financials. And if the seller backed off production or, got a little, lazy on the expense monitoring side, then that can affect the purchase price. So it's really, if I'm going to put any takeaway from this, it's to get somebody like Scott representing the buyer, Brian or the seller, Brian representing the broker. So collectively they put a team together because there's power in numbers to make sure that it's fair and equitable on both sides, buyer and seller side, as they transition into to finally make that transition happen. So that's kind of what I'm kind of seeing as the biggest overlooks. And again, I'm open to debating there, but that's just kind of what I see from the financing side as I look at sellers' financials and kind of lay it out to make sure that's the right investment for our buyers.
Okay.
Yeah. We push hard on the EBITDA. Basically what we're saying is how much profit is there in this practice for you to buy? And because of the reality of the marketplace, yeah, I mean, price to collection still comes up, Josh. So I'm with you 100%. We're going to start the movement. Yeah. Side note, I had a banker once say, she was a vet banker, said, "Hey, rewrite how to buy a dental practice and just write it as how to buy a veterinary practice." And so we did. And the vet deals were so different that it was interesting, that marketplace.
Right.
But yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, biggest mistake, Adisha, is not having your own team that you pay look at the deal. So on the buyer side, I'd say, and Scott's going to like this number actually, 6.5 out of 10 of our deals, we recommend the buyer just pay asking price. But the 3.5, all that being said, our average buyer saves, last year was 66,015, 66,015 was our average savings on the purchase price, meaning a 6.5 out of 10 times the price was fair. The guys that know what they're doing, like Scott, priced the practice fairly. But there's a significant number of practices that are just priced in crazy town, and having somebody actually look through the numbers and give you a real valuation can be pretty meaningful, to the tune of, again, it was a median number, but it's $66,000 per buyer. And I would say the mistake sometimes I see buyers make is, well, I bounced it off my attorney and my attorney said it looked pretty good. Or I bounced it off of Josh and Josh is a banker and he said it looks pretty good. And you got to remember, guys like Josh, they legally can't value the dental practice. They can approve a price. They can approve whether or not it will cash flow, but that's different than the price. So anyway, I'm just agreeing with you, Josh.
Hey, I appreciate that.
And I can chime in how we value practices.
Yes,
Number one, it's never just percentage of collections. We take, what's the collections, and then we take what profitability is, and then we'll have multipliers on each with a bunch of other subjective components. What's the geography, what's the type of dentistry, and a number of things. If a practice is really, really profitable, that's going to carry a lot of weight, and that'll affect how we value these. But in the end, we don't even put a listing price on a practice. We say, here's what we valued it at. This is what we know a bank would lend. And then we're going to let the market determine that price. Yeah. So, if you're trying to sell your house for $800,000 and I show up in your world with 10 pre-qualified buyers that all want to live in your neighborhood, what are the odds that purchase price is going to go up? So we're going to let the market actually determine the price. Sometimes it's less, as Brian is saying, if there's not a ton of interest, or maybe there's some negatives to the practice. But again, we have valued it. We know for sure this can get financed. And if it can't get financed, we'll just tell the doctor that. And we'll say, we don't know that this is we can attempt it, but we don't know that this is actually gonna achieve your goal. And we do probably between 700 and 800 valuations a year. And not all of those obviously go to market. So in fact, more don't go to market than do, just because there are aspects of the practice that need to be fixed before we can get what the doctor's looking for out of it.
Yeah, I'm also seeing a seller gets an offer from a PE or a DSO, and they try to take that and bring it down into the private world and say, hey, this DSO or this corporate group said that I'll get a 12 multiple, and I'll try to sell that to an associate or try to sell that to on the private side. That's a very, I'm starting to see that quite a bit. I'm seeing it kind of tail off a little bit more. I'm seeing a lot on the veterinary side, but still on the dental side, we're seeing them kind of take that appraisal that they got from that valuation they got from a corporate and trying to bring it into the private space, and it doesn't work.
Yeah,
Banks
I always tell the
can't lend
buyers,
to it.
the buyers that bring me those, I say, no problem. Go back to the seller. Go tell the seller that she has to work for you for the next 5 years at 20% of production and has to grow the practice 40%.
Mhm.
And, essentially structure it like a DSO deal and then, see what the seller says.
And see,
Yeah.
and let the market dictate it, like Scott said.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a good response. I like that, Brian.
Okay, so let the market dictate it. But something I just took out of this whole conversation is getting that team together, right? Brian, Scott, Josh, even, right? Getting that team together and really planning to sell. How long of like a time frame are we looking at when a person says, okay, or practice owner says, okay, I'm gonna sell. So that, at the end of the day, they're not going to be hasty about it, nor would they get complacent, as Josh said earlier, when the time comes.
I'm curious, Scott. So I get them at a different point. I get the buyer that found Scott's practice,
Mm-hmm.
and then I get them from that moment to closing. And I can tell you the average buyer we worked with last year was it took them 108 days. And again, that's a
Okay.
median. Some were a little bit longer, so 3 months and a few days. But Scott's got a different answer because he's getting the seller when they're thinking about it, talking about it. How do you measure that, Scott? And then I'm sure it's different for private versus DSO sales.
Yeah, I mean, we'll create a prospectus for free, first of all. So we're not,
Mm-hmm.
the doctor hasn't paid us anything. So I feel like if a doctor goes off, and I know there are some brokers that charge, $3,000 or more to do evaluation. I suppose maybe that helps move the doctor a little faster. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of how fast can we get the financials from the doctor to complete that evaluation. We've got an entire team that puts that all together. So call that 2, 3, 4 weeks of the doctor getting us everything and then our team creating it. And then we'll sit with the doctor for an hour, typically over a Zoom call, and review it, talk about what their options might be. Is this one that they want to go to market? And then it takes us probably 3 to 4 weeks to make the market, meaning the actual marketing of the practice, both private and DSOs. So we've got actually our own proprietary artificial intelligence that we've built within our system that actually matches buyers and sellers. And so we've got at least 3,500 buyers in our system right now. And we know what their parameters are, what their characteristics are, what are they looking for. And so this AI will start to show us who we need to make sure we get this practice in front of. Again, a lot of brokers just list the practice on a website or on the dental society or the state board. We do that too, but we start with driving all of these listings to our buyer network. And obviously there's a lot that we're doing to push that to them. Once we get offers, then there's typically a back and forth for a week or so. Once we get a signed letter of intent, then it's generally a 60 to 90 day time period. So, I mean, I just described what could be a 6-month process, but it could be, 3 to 4 months as well. Just depends on the doctor doing their part and how much interest there is. How many folks are we putting this in front of, and what do the offers look like?
Do you have a number, Scott, on valuations done? Doctor says, yes, let's list it, to a signed LOI? Like, do you know what the median time is for PTS?
I don't have that statistic. I'm sure I could find it,
Yeah, I was just
but
curious.
on average, we are probably call it a month, just because again, we've got to talk to the groups, the various interested parties, and then we're queuing up a bunch of introductions, either in person or via Zoom. Then we're getting those letters of intent. Many of these groups have to put it in front of their committees, and that can be a week or two before they can even generate an LOI. So it just depends on how agile the group is. Some of these smaller emerging groups can move a lot quicker. The larger ones, everything they do is a board that they've got to put, in front of for approval.
Cool. Yeah, just curious.
Okay. Super. Now
I got one
let's.
more thing to add to that, Adish. Sorry.
Yes, please, Josh, because it
I think
started with you.
if I'm a seller and I bought my practice, let's say I was 30 years old and I know that I want to have a good 12 to 15 year run, I would get an appraisal on my practice every 5 years. The difference between, and Scott can do that, right? So you can get Scott in as early as 10 years, 15 years early. But in residential, there's comps that can draw comparables between my house and my neighbor's house, a little bit of square footage difference and all that. But you can essentially, if I'm a seller, I can build my own my own comps and say, and sell, go create like basically your own benchmark. You could show to a seller the consistency of cash flow that has been occurring in my practice year over year for the past decade and a half, which is very powerful when you go try to get, kind of top dollar. But it's also a good way to manage your practice to make sure that you are still on track and consistent with expense control and EBITDA and collections, and make decisions based on now. You can also run a lot of that through, Scott mentioned AI. AI is a powerful tool now that helps doctors make not decisions, but it helps them start making decisions, helps them organize thoughts in their head. So that's one of my takeaways is pay a little extra money each year and get an appraisal on your practice and see how you stack up to your peers in your different markets. And you can use that technology like from ADA and all of that to see how you're doing and kind of reassess yourself as a business owner and clinician.
At Dental Tax, Josh, at my tax and accounting firm, we provide that free of charge to our clients every 2 years. So same as you, and in addition, it's for estate planning, right? And nobody ever wants to plan for that, but there's divorce, there's other things that come up, and anyway, it's good to have that valuation handy.
Okay. And now, Brian, let's flip that coin, right? We've heard what the sellers often miss. Now, for our buyers in the audience, when you're digging into the financials during the due diligence, what's a subtle red flag that screams, look closer? Subtle.
Okay. When you're looking at the financials specifically?
Yes.
Okay. I have a financials answer, and then I have, again, another answer.
Okay.
On the financials, gosh, there's several. Probably like the two that immediately come to mind would be declining collections without an explanation. So you see kind of a downward slope. 3 years ago it was $1 million. Last year it was 900. This year it's 822, whatever. Declining collections. And then, I would just look at the benchmarks for the categories. So you want staff to be somewhere around 30%, depending on if there's an associate or not. Labs and supplies, ideal is 10 to 15. I like to see them under 12. All in real estate costs, that's rent or, mortgage payment plus anything related to the building, under 10. And then all in, 58 to 60% overhead is ideal. So I rattled those numbers off fast. I wouldn't expect any dentist on this call to A, be able to recall those, or B, know how to pull those together. Nor should they. That's a silly thing for a dentist to spend their time figuring out how to do. So really, again, it's a little bit of a self-serving comment, and I don't mean it to be, but not knowing what the actual profit is of the practice. So the red flag is, I can't figure out how much money this dental practice makes, and it's not obvious to me. But Adisha, the point I'm making is, you're going to get handed a tax return. You're going to get handed a profit and loss statement. Dentists aren't trained to read those documents. So the red flag is, to ask yourself, how much money did this practice make? Really, not the tax number, but the actual number. And the red flag is that you don't actually know the number before you sign Scott's LOI. And not that Scott's trying to trick you. He's probably not, right? But understand that number. I said probably. Scott is not trying to trick you. Sorry,
course,
Scott.
of course.
Yeah. Anyway, those are the red flags that come to mind. Josh or Scott, I'm sure I'm forgetting something good though.
I think you nailed it with declining collections, right? There's a story there, what happened. Also, another one is a fluctuation. If it's an S Corp, line 7, officer comp.
Yeah.
If that number is not consistent, if 1 month, if 1 year it's 87 grand, the next one it's 300,000, there's something going on there. So those are 2 big red flags that I look at right away before I even flip to statement 2 and really dig into the expense category. But yeah, I would look at the trends. You want to look at trends of collections, trends of what the officer pays, the seller pays himself, because that eventually is going to flip over to you, right? So if it's inconsistent, then you're going to have an inconsistent experience as a business owner, and you got to really get your arms around the expenses. That's where I would go if I'm.
So, Adisha, I had another, as you were talking about due diligence, I had another thought come to mind. You asked about the financials, and I like Josh's explanation answer. Can I give one more big red flag kind of mistake that buyers make?
Non-financial.
Yeah, it's a lot of times dentists' only big purchase to this point, or one that they've just even observed, is real estate, right? They bought a house or an apartment or a condo or something like that. And the process of buying real estate feels similar to buying a business, a dental practice, but it is not. Okay. So here's the mistake that a lot of buyers make is I hop on PTS. I see a practice I'm interested in. I call Scott. Scott seems like a nice, ethical guy. I drive out to Scottsdale or Gilbert or wherever to see the practice. And I'm subtle, without even consciously knowing it, I'm thinking about it like a real estate purchase, right? I'm the buyer, and I'm walking around and I'm looking at the state of equipment, and I'm looking at the fish tank in the corner and wondering how old the practice is. Do we see fish tanks anymore? I don't think we do as much anymore, but and so the mistake that buyers make is thinking that they're buying the tangible physical things that you can see, walk, and kick. And here's the tricky part is you are, and you don't want a junky practice, right? If there's a dark room in the back where somebody's like, literally, there's no, like the imaging is a dark room, we've got some problems, carpeted operatories, that kind of thing. But for the most part, what you're buying is what you can't see. It's the financials. It's the reputation of the office. It's the habits of the patients, how much time they drive to, the referral doctors, if you're a specialist, all those things. And you don't get to see those things by walking around the practice. So Scott's less ethical peers in the industry have a silly definition of due diligence. And that is the buyer gets 1 hour to walk around the practice, and that's it, right? And that's ridiculous. And that's not how PTS runs. But buyers also have a ridiculous version of due diligence. And that is, I get any question that can enter my head at any point in the deal, I get an answer to immediately. And buyers think that that's what due diligence means. And both of those positions are completely ridiculous. There's no way that works for either buyer or seller. So the due diligence is something in the middle. And, I'll finish by saying that's why you get a team. Because you're a dentist, you do crowns, you do bridges, you don't know how to do this stuff. So get yourself a team.
Right, because you're not just buying real estate, you're buying a business. So that has a lot of different moving parts. And Carlos has a follow-up question, actually. Brian, maybe you can answer it. Is it a good idea for a first-time private buyer to buy the real estate with the practice, or wait when it comes to real estate and lease it first?
Almost always, yes. The trick is a lot of buyers can't afford to buy the real estate on day one. Most banks will require a down payment, although again, Josh, back to our first comment, that's changing a little bit too. But I would say, yes, it's a good idea, Carlos, for number one, control, right? What you're buying when you're buying the real estate is not an investment. Money is coming out of your pocket, whether you rent or you own that building. but you're buying control over the space. And again, this is an investment comment. You're buying a forced savings plan, right? You're forced to make a mortgage payment, which means you have an asset to sell down the road. But Carlos, you're saying, should I wait to buy the real estate? If you can buy the building on day one, go for it. I think it's generally a good idea. But if you have to wait, no problem. Just get what's called the first right of refusal. That's the option to buy the real estate, usually 12 to 24 months after you close on the business side. But that again, that's what I've seen work well. Scott, any differences of opinion there?
No.
Yeah.
Anytime they can own that real estate and have that, rent payment go to themselves, and they're maybe making a few dollars, or they're lowering their taxes because they, artificially push the rental rate higher.
Yeah.
I'll just stop you as the accountant in the room. I'll just caution you that is not a thing. You don't take money out of your left pocket, put it in your right pocket, and get to save on taxes. But I get your point, and it is, again, it's a way to force you to save money. And then yes, what you're not paying is the profit to the landlord, which should save you a few bucks. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to do.
Okay, fantastic. Scott, now a lot of the things that Josh and Brian had spoken about over here lend to that lack of an explanation, So let's talk about bridging that gap when a buyer and seller don't see eye to eye on price. We often hear terms like seller notes and earnouts. Can you demystify those for us and explain when they are a smart tool to get a deal done?
Sure. Obviously, two different things here. Seller notes come into play primarily when it's a private sale. Either the buyer's having a challenge getting finance from the bank because of their own financial situation. So now the seller is having to carry some portion of the note for a period, maybe 2 years, which allows the buyer to grow in that new acquisition, improve their financial position. This lessens the risk for the lender by having the seller carry some of that debt for a period of time. The earnouts really more so come into play when the buyer is a DSO. The DSO is wanting to make sure that the selling doctor has continued interest in making sure the practice performs at its current level post partnership. Typically, some portion of the upfront cash is held back over a 2, 3, 4, even 5-year time period, and then generally paid back annually with some kind of interest. But the DSO really is wanting to make sure that selling doctor who just got their money, maybe 70% of the total practice value, doesn't completely unplug from the future performance of the practice.
Okay. And Josh and Brian, can you also pitch in a little bit with regards to the explanations y'all were looking for and how these tools can somehow, balance it out?
I've seen the earnout used as a negotiation tool. So to Scott's point, I have yet to see a private buyer and seller agree on an earnout. Josh, I'd be curious if you've seen any in your travels, but
I got one.
One, oh yeah, interesting. Okay, so one more than me. But I've seen a lot of buyers use it as a negotiation tactic. So Scott, you own the practice now. I'm your buyer, and Scott, Josh, you gave the story of Scott had private equity come and tell him that his $3 million collecting practice is actually worth 12, right? So Scott comes to me and he's like, Brian, this practice is worth $12 million. I see it's right here. I have the PDF. I can forward it to you. For you, I'll give it to you for $9 million. $3 million discount. You are welcome, And Scott's thinking he's a pretty nice guy. And I'm the buyer going, $9 million, that's 300% of collections. That's a pretty big number. So essentially what Scott's doing in that case, I don't know why I keep picking on you, Scott. Scott's he can send me some nasty gram after this. But
all good.
What Scott's doing is he's saying, hey, the potential of this practice is worth so much money, Brian. You should pay for the potential. And so what I've seen a lot of buyers do, Adisha, to your point or to your question, is they use the earnout as a negotiation tool. So I would say, hey, no problem, Scott. I will give you $9 million. Now, I'll give you $3 million today, and 2 years from now, 5 years from now, provided collections are at this number that you told me the potential is there for, I'll cut you a check for the other $6 million. No problem. I'll go talk to Josh. He's my banker. He'll gladly write me the check. When that happens, usually the sellers go, oh, okay, never mind. Let me see if I can kind of come back to reality. And I use some pretty ridiculous numbers there, but the point kind of still holds.
Yeah.
Right. Josh?
No, the one example I have was a very unique situation, right? Unfortunately, one of the practicing dentist passed away. His wife was running the practice. They quickly acquired it for $100,000 with an agreement for an earnout in 2.5, I believe, years down the road. There would be a $400,000 earnout as long as it, met certain criteria. So she got the widow, and got her purchase price. But it's a very unique situation. It's under kind of extreme circumstances that an earnout would happen in a private sale. But again, never say never. But yeah, that's just one situation where I got one up on Mr. Hanks over there.
That's a good. That's
Absolutely.
creative. I like that. That's really good. Yeah.
And I think we're kind of approaching the end of the session, actually. But as we were talking about bridging the trust gap on future performance, our sponsor, Equa Marketing, actually has something to give for our audience here tonight. And that is a free complimentary marketing strategy meeting, right? Because first, it's a deep dive analysis, before you even meet the team. The team will research your practice's specific online footprint, analyzing local competitors and reviewing current SEO measures, right? So this will give you a real good background of how your digital marketing is, performing as an asset right now. Then you'll have a one-on-one session with one of Equi's senior marketing strategists, an expert who specializes in helping dental practices dominate their local market. And the entire session is designed to give you a customized roadmap to either maximize your practice's value before a sale or even de-risk your investment as a buyer. So the goal is to provide with an expert third-party analysis of your practice's most critical asset, one of which is your marketing, right? So you will see a QR code on your screen and a link in the chat. I encourage you to book a spot right now while we're talking. And let me frame it this way for everyone here tonight. If you're a seller, this session delivers a plan to prove your practice's patient acquisition strength and command the highest possible price. And if you're a buyer, this is your chance to perform a true marketing due diligence and ensure you're acquiring a healthy, growing asset, like we talked about in the session here, getting that team. And this is another aspect of the team, which is your marketing aspect. So with that being said, we have arrived at the end of the panel discussion. We had a lot more questions to go through, but I suppose we're going to go for part 2 then. But thank you, everyone, especially our expert panel, Josh McSpadden, Brian Hanks, and Scott Plantenberg. Gentlemen, you shared so much incredible insight and actionable advice. And sincere thank you to our attendees who, invested their time, and we appreciate you for doing that. Your participation is truly what makes this community thrive. And on behalf of the entire team at Thriving Dentist and our incredible panel, we wish you the very best on your transition journey, or as Josh said, on your project journey. Thank you again for being with us. We'll see you at the next Thriving Dentist expert panel. Until then, take care.